guys, welcome back to Colicchio's Classroom, and today we're going to be talking about some pretty controversial stuff. Or at least it was controversial for the time period. The scientific revolution, which took place in Europe from the 16th to the 18th century, connected both the Reformation and the Renaissance to the Enlightenment. So how did this whole era begin? Similar to most young children, most people began to ask why, and use reason to guide their scientific observation of nature to answer their questions. Also stopped going to the Roman Catholic Church and stopped looking at old Greco-Roman scientists such as Ptolemy and Aristotle. It was at this time that new discoveries and theories revolutionized the way that people thought. The first person we're going to be talking about is Nicolaus Copernicus, a Polish astronomer. Copernicus disproved the Ptolemaic principle of geocentrism, which is the idea that the Earth actually has the sun revolve around it, and so do the other planets, and came up with this idea of the heliocentric theory, where we, the Earth, and the other planets go around in a circular motion around the sun. Geocentrism and other archaic science practices are the topic of today's mini-rant. Geocentrism, the idea that the Earth is the center of the universe. This is one of the most archaic belief systems, and you got to think back a couple thousand years to when this idea was invented. It has been disproven by Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo, and Newton, four guys that are much smarter than most of the people watching this video. The sad thing is that people back then, I can understand it a little bit more for their rationale, but for modern day practices in science, like the Earth being flat, B.O.B., I'm looking at you, and climate change. Sometimes you just have to accept the fact that something exists because the facts back it up, and that something you have been taught or what you believe in might just be wrong. Best wishes, Mr. Colicchio. The next person we're going to look at is Johannes Kepler, a German scientist, astrologist, and discoverer. Kepler did prove Copernicus' theory that we revolve around the sun to be correct, but not in a circular pattern, which he once believed. Kepler believed and proved that we actually orbit the sun in an elliptical pattern. He also stated that the planets move quicker when we are closer to the sun rather than when we are moving farther away. This all has to do with gravitational pull, and you can look into scientific articles that prove that. It's kind of like if you were to take time actually slows down at the poles rather than if we were at the equator. Something interesting about gravitational pull. And the next discoverer is Galileo, and he invents a stronger telescope which he's able to use to see Jupiter and the sun and the moon. And he's able to not only prove Copernicus' theory, right, of us revolve around the sun, but he's also able to prove Kepler's theory that we go around in an ellipse. Now, we haven't talked about them a lot, but the church comes in around with Galileo, and they're pretty upset. As Copernicus published his ideas posthumously, meaning after he died, and smart for doing so, he didn't face the same criticism that Galileo was going to be facing. The Inquisition, if you remember it from my last video, was pretty rampant in Europe at this time, going off and killing everybody who was not Catholic, so Protestants, Jews, Muslims, whole nine yards. And it was at this time that they accused Galileo of being a heretic, or somebody who spoke out against church doctrine, this idea of canon law. And the first time he was able to, say he recanted, but he wrote another book, and he kind of made somebody who seemed like they supported the geocentric theory to be kind of an idiot. Church didn't like that, accused him of being a heretic, condemned him, and convicted him as being a heretic, but because he was too old to be thrown in jail, they gave him house arrest. It was from this point that he created the Illuminati. No, wait, that's just the preface for Angels and Demons, a book written by Dan Brown, and a horrible movie starring Ewan McGregor. Last but most certainly not least, Sir Isaac Newton, who, fascinated by Galileo and Kepler and Copernicus, not only proved all of their theories to be correct, but also proved that gravity, this thing that holds us down to Earth, is universal, and it not only affects people here on Earth, but everything up in space as well. And Newton needed a new way to kind of explain and prove this theory of planetary motion, because nobody really understood it. They just kind of accepted it as just the laws of nature. So he invented this thing called calculus, and to the dismay of most intelligent high schoolers and college students who take calculus, calculus is able to prove not only planetary motion, but a bunch of other experiments and discoveries, like when a light passes through a prism and it turns into a rainbow spectrum. I mean, could you imagine Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon album without this invention? It would just be like outer space. Boring. The scientific revolution was a time period where, unbeknowingly, people began to create a power struggle between science and religion. Most scientists, especially Newton, were very Christian, and they didn't want to seem atheist or non-Christian like, and weren't trying to question their religion so much as they were trying to find the answer and disprove theories, because that's what humans do. We want to disprove things. It's called being skeptical. And skepticism was running rampant during the scientific revolution. It's from here that we look at the Renaissance and how humanism had affected art and literature. Humanism has now infused itself in science, and in the Enlightenment, it's going to infuse the politics. And we're going to look at ration, and we're going to look at logic, and we're going to turn this into individualism. And one might argue that's what we're still searching for. Thanks for watching.